Jeremy said, we're going to be doing a design sprint workshop. And this is us. Well, that was me when I was blonde and had glasses, but Jayeon looks pretty similar. I'm Dylin. I'm a program manager on a team called Design Relations at Google. I'm here with Jayeon. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Hi, my name is Jayeon. It rhymes with National Park Zion, Z-I-O-N, but with J. So that's an easier way to remember. It also means nature in Korean, which is where I'm from. And I'm UX design lead in Google, based in San Francisco, and I work with Dylin. And as Jeremy mentioned, we work with a lot of partners outside Google. That's one of our main roles at Design Relations. So really happy to meet our potential partners here, and we would love to introduce our design thinking process and also hear from you how eventually you think you could apply this to your projects.
Cool. I put together a very rough schedule of what we're going to be doing this morning, but one of the first things you'll learn about design sprints is you have to plan a lot, but then normally you kind of throw that plan out the window right when you get started. You kind of go with the flow. So this is a rough idea of what we're going to be doing. It will all be explained to you. We're definitely going to squeeze time in there for breaks and stuff. It'll be good. But overall, in today's workshop, we're going to be talking about the sprinting framework, discuss when you should and shouldn't sprint, try out some sprint methods, and then we're going to go over some resources available to you so you can run your own design sprints. But first, let's start with an icebreaker. Now, I know most of you already know each other's names, especially, hopefully, the names of the people on the teams you came with. But icebreakers aren't just about learning. Still? Yeah, now we're back. They really lay a creative foundation for your sprint. And it's important to, like, when you start a sprint, to demonstrate to the folks in your sprint that the day isn't going to be like a typical day at work. You're going to be doing out-of-the-box thinking, getting creative, so you kind of want to, like, set up the day in that way. They're a really great creative warm-up in general, and research shows that if you have an opportunity to talk about yourself when you begin an activity, you're going to be more engaged throughout the activity, because we all just want to talk about ourselves at the end of the day. So let's do just like a quick little warm-up. If everybody could grab a Post-it, you just need one, a Post-it and a pen. I'm going to grab one too. You got one? Cool. Let me get my timer ready. All right. So what you're going to do is when I say go, you're going to have 1 minute to draw yourself as a superhero. And your superpower is the unique power that you have that you're going to be bringing to the sprint today. Maybe you're like super analytical, you're analytical man, or, you know, data girl or enthusiasm person. So it's just quick, silly warm-up. None of us, well, some of us maybe are great artists, but a lot of us aren't, and that's okay. Are you ready? 1 minute on the clock. Go. Minute goes fast, huh? All right, don't worry too much if you haven't finished your beautiful masterpiece. It's not exactly the point. So now in our little groups that we're with, does everybody have a little group-ish that you're with? If you don't, I'll come around and you can share yours with me. We're going to take just 3 minutes just to go around just in your group and share your superpower. So as an example, I drew myself as positivity girl because I'm just going to bring the positive vibes and enthusiasm to the day, keep people energized. And I drew, well, an interesting portrait of myself with dog hair all over my sweater because that's my current situation. All right, so let's take, about 3 minutes. Oh, put it on your forehead. I like that. You don't have to do that. We'll take about 3 minutes to just go around and share and have our moment to talk about ourselves so we're engaged. Cool? All right, go for it. And let me say 4 minutes. Oops. 4 minutes. Oh, they turn your... Oh, no, they don't. Hi, Dylan. Oh, hi. I don't know how to...
Just want to let you know, it's okay to like walk past the speakers, those speakers.
Okay.
But just be careful of like feedback, talking in front of it or standing in front of it.
Okay.
Don't stand in front of those.
The middle tall ones, yeah. The tall middle ones over here, and right next to that.
Like that?
But where did that one come from?
Don't
'Cause
go.
we're all
Don't
sta-
go that to that.
Okay.
But we can
so
stand,
stay
like, in
within
the middle and
stay
stuff.
within the TVs. Okay.
Yeah.
Eventually, we will have to move around in the exercise phase, but you can turn this off then.
Oh no, it's fine. We'll just try to not stand in the front of the speakers.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But you can feel free to walk around.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
So now I'll go through what a design sprint is, yada yada. You're
Okay.
gonna go into the specifics.
Okay.
And it back. Yeah. Cool. I'm gonna look at some. You guys got good drawings? Yeah. Let me see. Okay. Okay.
Myself as Kodamon. My name is also Aman, so it comes almost.
Good branding.
Like more towards networking,
Nice. I don't know how to make this. I can't. Mine was a stick figure too. Just gonna walk around like this. And I have conversations. Those are good, you guys. You guys got good stuff? Okay, beautiful, beautiful. It's just a warm up. I thought that said napping, and I was like, this is amazing. Napping is important. How are you?
Do you want to mention something about it, or do you want to just let them do it?
They have other like stuff they have to be working on anyway.
Okay.
All good. About 1 minute left. 1 minute. So cool on those.
How many groups do you think we'll have?
I don't know. I think like groups of 5, right?
Groups of 5. That would be like.
Because some people are like, they're like groups of 2 or 3 and then they want them to combine.
Okay.
That might work. Some groups of 5, yeah. Because then the affinity mapping and stuff takes too long if it's like 6 or 7,
right.
you know?
So we will.
So now I can All right. Are we all feeling creative and engaged? Yes. Need more coffee? That's cool. That's cool. All right. So now that we've warmed up, I'm going to give you a briefish overview of design sprints. So what is a design sprint? Contrary to the name, design sprints are not just about designers and UX. These are also not agile sprints. People often get those confused because they're both called sprints. It is what it is. But we're talking about a Google design sprint today. So a Google design sprint is a 6-phase framework for answering critical business questions through design, prototyping, and testing ideas with users. And if we look at this diagram, you'll see kind of the traditional framework you might use to launch a product in gray. Your team has an idea, engine design, kind of go back and forth on what's possible, often miscommunicating. You finally get it together and launch the product, and then you find out what your customers think about it. But design sprints are a shortcut to these learnings by going from idea to learning quickly. So when you are ready to build the product, you know exactly what your customers are looking for, and your teams know exactly how to design and build it. The 6 phases are understand, define, sketch, decide, prototype, and validate. And as you move through these phases, we move in and out of divergent and convergent thinking, hence these diamond guys. Divergent refers to the activities you do on your own during the sprint, whereas convergent activities involve the whole team getting together, sharing ideas, and voting. And we'll get into more what happens in each of these phases in just a minute. Design is not an individual sport, and to that end, we leverage the sprints to include all points of view and align around this kind of new view that we create together. Design sprints bring together this view on a problem because you have your cross-functional team on board. Oh, I thought you had something to say. No? So PMs, marketing, and other business folks are going to be thinking about what's profitable, among other things. Your engineers are going to know about what's possible in a technical sense. They can comment on feasibility. And then your designers are going to focus on making the product desirable and easy to use. And you really get the most out of design sprints by involving this cross-functional team. If design and engineering are included in the outset as part of your initial strategy discussions, we're able to dramatically reduce the amount of time we spend just communicating. And this also is going to increase the amount of viable ideas generated. Oops, went too fast. Here we are. But you can use a design sprint at any time. It's not just when you're kicking off a new product or project. You can customize your sprint based on where you are in the life cycle of your product. The methods you use for a design sprint will be different at project initiation as they would if you were iterating on an existing product. We kick off the planning for a design sprint with a sprint brief, which is a document that describes exactly what you're going to do during the sprint. The most important part, of course, is defining the sprint challenge and what deliverables you're ultimately going to be striving towards. So let's hear from Jayeon about how we'd plan the sprint phases from here.
Thanks, Dylin. Okay, so as Dylin mentioned, design sprint usually has 6 phases. Sometimes you can skip 1 or 2, maybe maximum, but usually we recommend going through all 6 phases. And as you see it here, and as Dylin mentioned, it goes through diverging and converging processes. So let's get familiar with this kind of going up and down as we walk through each of them. And what we're going to start with is understand phase. And in understand phase, we are ultimately doing expansion of our understanding across different disciplines and also being on the same page with everyone else in the sprint because they may have different expertise and different depth of knowledge in different areas. And by sharing that, we're hopefully on the same page as we begin the sprint. And how many of you here have done design sprint or something similar to this in their company before? Okay, so less than half, good. So if it was not clear, we're going to try some of these today ourselves with a hypothetical challenge. So just let's get familiar with it so that we can apply these phases as we practice. And in understand phase, various different methods can be used, and we can mix and match different things based on what your team's goals are and how your teams are consist of different people. But lightning talk is something that at Google at least we always try to do. So we recommend doing lightning talk, at least a couple of them. And you can bring the materials for lightning talks from your own team members. But often what we do is we invite people from different teams inside Google, or sometimes even from different organizations or companies outside Google, to hear some motivations, inspirations about relatively relevant projects of what we're going to do. So another thing that we often always do is how might we, and that is what we're going to do. So we're going to do lightning talk and how might we actually today, both of them. And from how might we, we're going to do affinity mapping, which is basically putting the ideas together that are related. And we'll also, if we have time, we might be able to do a little bit of user interviews as well. So all those things are examples of understanding phase activities. And overall, again, we help people to understand the problem and share and align on the understanding so that we can start the next phase with better status. And the next one is define. And in define phase, we evaluate everything that we learned in the understand phase to establish common vision. So this is where a team define and agree on specific focus and user types or personas that they want to design the prototype around, and also really settle on the goals and success metrics as well, which we will talk about a little bit later. And success metrics is to define quantifiable numeric outcomes about desirable behaviors. So something that you can measure will be all go there. And again, with your different team members, you want to align on this. Business model canvas is to answer some key business questions such as value props, customer segments, and distribution channels. Design principles is to define qualities and values of your design. So while success metrics is something that you can measure with numbers, design principles might be something a little softer and harder to numerically gauge, but still something that you want to make sure that your end product deliverable will be aligning with that. Golden path is to define a product's ideal user path that you can focus on, because you can think of so many different user paths and user journeys. So in this define phase, we can use golden path to understand and be on the same page about what the ideal user path would be. And an interesting exercise here is future press release, which is writing hypothetical press release just to set again the golden, rule of what the success is going to look like and how it's going to please users in a different way than other products have done in the market. Okay, the next phase is sketching, and based on the shared understanding and the common vision that we established through the previous stages, sketch phase allows us to diverge and create some ideas on our own. We will do some sketching today, so don't get scared, we'll have fun. And mostly each design sprint participant will individually generate ideas first, and then we'll merge them together. And obviously, who here is trained in design or some sort of artistic manners? Yeah, only one person. Okay, 3. But this is very common when we bring people together. People are not necessarily coming from a place where they're very comfortable drawing, but we find a very easy way to open people up creatively if they start to drawing, not necessarily writing. So if you feel uncomfortable about drawing, I just want to say that you are not alone. People often feel very uncomfortable drawing, but it's okay to not draw in a perfect manner. It's just to get an idea out there on the paper without having to write into Word, which then becomes so solid. Okay, and let's see. Sorry. Okay, in the sketch phase, there's comparable problem and put note taking. Sorry, I'm getting a little confused. Sorry about this. Oh yeah, so Crazy 8 is when we become most creative in terms of sketching. And after Crazy 8, we often do solution sketch, which is more specific drawing of the idea that you generated from Crazy 8. We will have a chance to do Crazy 8 today, but not necessarily solution sketch. But if you want to know more about that process, you can go to our website that we'll share later in terms of resource and find more about that. And other things that we do, which I got a little confused by, was comparable problem and the put up note taking, where you bring elements from the previous stages into the sketch, so you have richer resources to sketch with. And the next phase is deciding. So if sketching was, again, the diverging phase, deciding is narrowing down those ideas that we generated, because in Crazy 8, for example, each person will at least create 8 ideas in Sketch. So there are a lot of ideas floating out there. So now it's time to narrow down a little bit and check out what everyone else has done. So we finalized the direction and concept to be prototyped at the end of the sprint, and each participant will share their solution sketch and present that, and from that we get feedback, and we also do a lot of voting, which I think we'll have a chance to do a little bit. And deciding, especially in given how you are in this space, you might be very familiar with this demographic process already in your organizations. But sometimes when we work with a much bigger company, there are different layers of stakeholders. Sometimes it can be a little challenging at this phase where someone has a louder voice in terms of what we want to move on with. So sometimes it can get tricky, but it's really important to bring everyone's voice into this process and treat them all equally and really celebrate the diversity of opinions as we make decisions and narrow down the ideas. So that's something that we always emphasize on. And next phase is prototyping. And the prototyping phase is where we create something that is real enough, and it doesn't have to be the final project, of course, because given the time frame that we have, which is usually minimum 2 days to 5 days, but it's very difficult to bring people on in the one room for 5 days. So given that time frame, prototype can have different forms, but it needs to feel real enough so either stakeholders or your users in the validation process can have meaningful input in the prototype. And users will invite you to get the real idea of what you're planning and making so that we can gather meaningful feedback, opinions, and suggestions. And some methods that we do are written here, and it has to become a really creative process in terms of what to produce. So in previous examples that I led and have participated in Design Sprint, we've done some snapshots of movement to create the video-like quality. So it can be storyline, or it can be paper-cut prototype. If you don't have screen designer with you in the team, you can also just draw in the paper and still create enough story that shows the essence of the product that you're trying to deliver. So it doesn't have to be a full prototype where it's interactive, digital, and etc. You can be really creative just how to deliver the gist of your ideas. And finally, the validate phase is a moment where you can really bring this to the users and stakeholders to see what you've done with your team is received by others. So it's really exciting time. It can be a little nervous too, but usually even if you get some negative feedback, it's something that you can take away with you in a very meaningful way. And sprint often is not the end of anything. It's just a step to get into the fuller development process. So in that sense, whether you get positive feedback from those validation processes or not, you can learn something really meaningful that makes your product stronger. This is yours. Okay. And I think Dylan's going to take over again.
All right. Oh, hang on, I got to get my Britney Spears back again. All right, cool. Okay, so when should you use a design sprint? Again, you can use them at any stage of a project. Use them for things like creating a shared future vision for a new product, refining or creating a product strategy, getting out of the current thinking when you kind of feel stuck, which I find it very helpful, or just for speeding up your development process. There's certain situations, however, when sprinting is not the best tool. When you have a product direction and dedicated time to work on it, you don't need a sprint, you just do it. When leadership has a clear agenda or outcome that they're already looking for, it's not gonna be beneficial to do a design sprint and find something that they don't wanna hear and then not be able to do it anyway. I've had that happen before with like big bank companies, not a good idea. And just in general, if you don't have executive support, a sprint isn't a good idea. You really want to make sure that you have that before you sprint. There's a bunch of benefits of doing a design sprint, of course. It can inject new thinking into your approach. It drives consensus by getting decision makers in a room and answering open product questions. You can validate concepts with users early. And it really improves collaboration, increases team engagement, and reduces the time spent reiterating on the project vision. So there are a couple different ways a sprint can conclude. Sometimes you get an efficient failure. You totally missed the mark on what you thought your users wanted, but this way you avoided building a product that nobody's interested in, so saved you time in general. Other times you might have a flawed success. In that case, perhaps what you want to do is set up another sprint or iterate the product with an understanding of the known flaws, so you kind of just pivot from there. And of course, occasionally you have an epic win. Your users loved your prototype, and you know exactly what you need to do to go ahead and build it and take it to market. So I just want to go through like a case study example of a design sprint that I led a while back to give you an idea of how everything kind of comes together. Have y'all heard of Headspace? Mindfulness, yeah. So if you haven't, Headspace is a meditation app that guides people through various mindfulness activities. And I went to their really cool office in Los Angeles to help them tackle a new feature and enter a brand new market. They wanted to create a meditation program for kids. So this is like a preview of our sprint brief with our sprint challenge, which is the most important part of your sprint brief. Our goal was to create an MVP for a feature within their current application, and our deliverables were user-validated prototypes that we would test with users. So since none of us had any experience designing for kids, we did a lot of pre-work for this sprint. And oftentimes, as a sprint master especially, you do the most amount of work for a sprint before the sprint. The Headspace PM gave everyone on his cross-functional team a task to research different types of children's behavior. He asked them to keep diaries of how their own kids were behaving, stuff like that, and they all presented their findings in the understand phase so we could all get on the same page and kind of create this shared brain together. I also asked around at Google and found that we had just released a new YouTube Kids app, so I had the PM from that product present to us over Google Hangouts about his experience creating something for this audience. So over the course of the 3-day sprint, we came up with a bunch of ideas and voted on them, and then the Headspace team put this really cool prototype together. On the 3rd day of the sprint, people brought in their kids and kids of their friends, and we hacked together kind of a scrappy UX lab by just dialing into Google Hangouts from 2 different meeting rooms. This way, everyone on the team got to see these validation sessions, which was super powerful. Hearing the results of a user study from a UX researcher is nice, but seeing a kid's actual reaction in the moment really helped each member of the team understand how to fix or enhance each feature of the prototype. So I think this is a good example of a sprint, because people often assume that if you don't get everything right, the sprint is a failure. We got about half of our assumptions right on this one. Parents really like the different meditations based on moments when kids are craziest. They often don't want to go to sleep. They have trouble calming down during a temper tantrum. So having features set up for these specific instances was really good. Kids also really like these fun little characters the team created. And for a prototype, they even programmed in like fun sound effects for each of the touch targets in the clickable prototype, and kids were really jazzed on that. We missed the mark in asking kids to close their eyes during a meditation. And after thinking about it, kids don't want to close their eyes. They're asked to close their eyes either when they're being forced to sleep or they're about to get a surprise. So either way, they're not really in a very meditative state when their eyes are closed. So the team took this learning and created kind of a soothing animation to follow along with instead. So being able to learn all of this in just 3 days is what sprints are all about. It's not really about what you get right or what you get wrong, but what you learn about your product and your customers. Okay, so let's talk about planning a sprint. If you were the facilitator of a sprint, which hopefully you'll go on and do this, you really have to plan and prepare for it. A sprint involves a lot of moving parts. You need to make sure you get your cross-functional team together. Sometimes they're not all in the same office, they don't work together. Lots of different hour things to figure out. Got to find a space to do it in, and really plan it out. What else am I saying here? The more you prep, the more productive, creative, and effective your team is going to be. So planning includes getting executive support and buy-in, very, very important. Selecting your cross-functional sprint team participants, picking a date and a sprint space, finding cross-functional partners, meeting with them regularly before the sprint so they know what to expect, understanding the problem space, assigning these lightning talks, kind of like the Headspace PM did, like here's your homework to do before the sprint, and scheduling your user research participants for the validation phase. You're also going to create a sprint brief that I mentioned earlier. These are really important to get everybody on the same page, outline all the important elements of your sprint, determine the success of a sprint, something to kind of compare what you did to. You want to include all your detailed logistics and identify any roadblocks that you might encounter. And this is the critical difference with the Google Sprint methodology compared to other design thinking approaches, I guess. It's because it's really focused and has a really clearly defined challenge and set deliverables that everyone has agreed to. Again, I mentioned the sprint challenge and deliverables are kind of the most important part of your sprint brief. This is your North Star, where you're going to. When people start having other ideas and going off track, you say, hey, we're just doing this. So this is an example, obviously includes what, who, and when, and our challenge statement, and I'm going to read it here because it's going to be our mock sprint challenge for today. It's to design an app to help connect professionals to qualified mentors with concepts to be implemented in the next 2 quarters. So it really lays out exactly what are we doing, designing an app, who are we working with, these professionals, and when is it going to happen. And our deliverables today are just a broad range of ideas in sketch form because we only have a few hours. So now we're going to switch gears and pretend that we're in this sprint as participants. And so we're going to start doing workshop-y things. And I'm wondering if now is the time to kind of rearrange ourselves. I know some folks are here with teams of less than 5, some of more than 5. So I'm going to put this challenge to you guys. Let's get together in groups of 5. You can split from your team. You can join a new team. You don't have to be with the organization you came with. In fact, I encourage you to go sit with some strangers, but kind of get in huddles of groups of 5. Cool?
Yeah, I
Alright.
think it would be really nice to meet other people that you haven't worked with because that represents the actual scenario better. So
Yes.
try to meet new people that you haven't worked with before.
Let's get started with our mock sprint.
So we're going to explain how this works. So if you can bring your attention to the front and center, we'd appreciate that.
Cool?
Okay, thank you.
Bring it back. All right. Cool. Yeah. Don't stress too much on the number. You guys are like AI specific. What's the number? Okay. So I just want to look at this sprint challenge again and make sure is everybody familiar with the idea of like a professional mentor? No, I mean, I've done this in other countries and like, there's cultural differences. We have people from all around the world, but just, like a coach, a business coach of sorts. Cool. So everybody understands the sprint challenge? Yes-ish? Cool. So let's put ourselves in the mind space. We're going to kind of pretend that we are doing this, and we're going to try out some of the methods that you would do in a real sprint to kind of try this out. So let's all get in the mind space. This is your cross-functional team. You're getting together to create this awesome mentoring app. So let's start our sprint. The first phase is the understand phase. And again, this is where we kind of generate this shared brain. Everybody, comes to the sprint with different perspectives. And we normally start the understand phase by explaining our different perspectives from our unique points of view through lightning talks. So these are just super short talks where, we'd have each person on the team come up and talk for 10 minutes about what they know about the problem space. And here, we already went through all these methods. So we're going to do a mock lightning talk. And as part of that, we're going to also be taking notes via a method we call How Might We. So Jayeon's going to start her lightning talk soon. Oh, I forgot to announce. I saw this gentleman taking a picture, and that's totally cool. But I can send these slides out. So you don't have to, sorry. Barbara told me to announce that. So you don't have to worry about it. I will send these slides out. Don't stress. Okay, so during her lightning talks, we're going to write down notes as how might we's. Pay close attention as you write down your how might we's because these are kind of the building blocks for the rest of the day. These let us capture individual ideas and frame them as opportunities we might want to explore. We call them how might we's because how assumes opportunities exist. Might says we don't have to find the answer to this, but we might. And we is because we're all going to do it together. Now, what does that actually mean? So some tips for writing how might we's. You want to write with a thick, dark Sharpie, and I don't know that we have enough, but in a real sprint, those are important because in a real design sprint, you'd put all your notes on the wall, and you want everyone on your team to be able to read them, like take a step back and read them all. You want to be succinct, one idea per sticky note. You don't want to be too broad, and you don't want to be too narrow. And you really want to look at capturing any pain points as opportunities. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. And you don't go for quantity here. Like I even write down my bad ideas. Like you just kind of want to have like a big stack of sticky notes after listening to a lightning talk. So this is kind of a tricky concept at first. And I like to use this diagram to explain how might we, since they kind of go against our natural instincts to come up with a solution to a problem. So our natural inclination is thinking of these solutions, but this can be super limiting. So maybe I'm listening to a lightning talk, and I hear that our users are finding passwords to be inconvenient. So I've jumped to a solution. I'm like, oh, we're going to create autofill passwords. Let's move on. However, if I capture this pain point as an opportunity, how might we help people remember their passwords? Later on, when I share this with the team, we collectively can come up with multiple solutions to this particular opportunity. And this way, we're not jumping to a conclusion just yet, but just identifying a space where later on we can all think of solutions together. So you kind of got to like put the brakes on your natural brain where it's like, I have an idea. You got to like, wait, just think of opportunity capturing. that make sense? Cool. So let's move on to lightning talks. There's a bunch of different examples of things that you might bring in a real sprint. But today, Jayeon's going to kind of combine all of those into one super lightning talk just to give you an idea of what one is like. So as she presents this lightning talk, everybody get your stickies ready because we're going to be writing how might we's during this. You don't need the whole stack of stickies to yourself. You can like split them up if you need to. But you want to have a pretty good amount because again, we're going for quantity. Cool? Everybody ready-ish? Cool. All right. So here's Jayeon from the PM on our team. I don't know how to do it.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
what Dylin was just saying is, as I mentioned earlier, in real sprint, speakers will be just a wide range of people. So I could be PM, and I could be marketing, and I could be from your own company or someone else that you know from outside, but it's still relevant to your business. So today, because it's just one person, I'm gonna pretend as if I'm in various different roles, but in real life, it will be just a collection of different people. Okay, so finding a mentor, I will present some relevant insights about finding mentors. So as you listen, I like how people already started, how might we, but we'll start. And I'll continue to check to see if you have any questions about how might we writing. But at the end of this series of speech, I would love to see each person having several sticky notes written. Okay, so why find a mentor? So multi-year study followed the career process of approximately 1,000 employees over a 5-year period and found that employees who have received mentoring were promoted 5 times more often than people who didn't have mentors. And both mentors and mentees were approximately 20% more likely to get a raise than people who didn't participate in the program. So that's inspiration related to this. And this is a chart that shows more statistics about this. Mentoring is critical for new businesses. When companies first launch, 83% of mentored businesses survive, whereas only 74% of non-mentored businesses survived. For startups, 42% of mentored businesses actually start up, and only 29% of non-mentored businesses end up getting off the ground. So I just want to check in. Somehow my whiz I might have written based on the last 2 slides is how might we communicate the success people might have without a mentor, with the mentor, and how might we demonstrate the importance of mentoring others to executives. How might we target those hoping to get promoted as people who should look for a mentor? Does it make sense? I see some kind of confused faces. Any questions? No? Okay. I actually want to invite a couple people here to share what they wrote so other people can hear what others have written. Yeah, one question. There's a mic coming.
While during the lightning talk, am I supposed to think about solutions directly? It's about what to ask.
Yes. Thank you for asking that question, because again, that's so important. Usually people in this field, like people in this room, and myself and Dylin, like all these people in this room, tend to think about solutions right away, because that's our culture partially. And this is intentionally stepping back, as Dylin mentioned, and put your foot on the brake by just creating more space for opportunities from which you can drag other solutions, which we will talk about later. In drawing or as you bring them together, you will move slowly onto the solutions. But here we're just thinking about opportunities. Yeah? Okay, thank you for the question. Any other questions? Yeah, here. Over there.
Hi.
Hi.
So you mentioned about sharing some notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, because you were showing these stats of how often people are promoted, those receiving mentoring versus those not receiving mentoring. And I was wondering whether there's like a survivor bias there, right? Like a lurking variable, like actually people seeking for mentorship are already that kind of person that are also seeking for promotion compared to those that don't seek. So maybe it's not only the effect of mentorship, but rather the mindset of that kind of customer, right? That persona. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very insightful point. And I'm curious, actually, let's leave the microphone to him because I have a question for him. How do you see it as an opportunity to build a stronger product, maybe for, either for focused audience or for diverse audience? I think it's up to you.
Yeah, so probably seems more intuitive to target the kind of audience that is going to be more interested in your product. So probably people not interested in mentoring or promotion, you shouldn't really think that much about them, although maybe some of them may be interested, but it's not the core of your business, right? So you said 2 more keywords, which is survivability of companies and promotion.
Yeah.
So yeah, the opportunity will be maybe how to brand the whole thing towards that kind of message, right?
Yeah, totally. So that could be your how to blend them together if that's what you see as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, so I want one person to share what they wrote down. Who's willing to share? Who's going to be the brave person? I'm going to make, oh yeah, you want to share? Okay.
So how can we communicate that mentorship can actually be beneficial to mentors?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah. So I think hopefully you will start to get an idea of what we are trying to do here. And as we move on to the next steps, you will see how this come together as we move on to the solutions. But let's try not to come down to solutions right away. Okay. So next one, I could also talk about challenges in the current environment in terms of finding mentorship. So here are some challenges in mentoring that researchers in the industry have found. Lack of understanding the value of mentorship. Unsure about where to start. Afraid to admit that they need mentoring, because that might imply weakness. They're concerned that they won't find a good fit. Think it will be expensive to find mentoring, and also you have to spend a lot of time. So there's some fears around spending money and time. So as you can see, there are a variety of hurdles that prevent people from finding mentors. And in the next one, as part of Lightning Talk, I might also share some internal research that has been done in the past, such as a persona. So personas are useful so that we can really get into the mindset of a user and be empathetic with the user. So example of this one, let's call a Googler Nina. So in this example, if we were doing this in Google as a one team inside Google, we would actually reach out to some Googlers who are interested in this topic, and we could have done interview before the sprint to gather more insights. So let's assume that's what we did, and she's passionate about her career and opportunities to learn and grow from others, and she desires to grow skills in specific benefits operations areas and continue to develop analytic capabilities and values the input of others on her performance and deliverables throughout the quarter. However, she's not sure how to actually find a mentor. Should it be someone from her own team, or is it better to find someone from outside her team? She's unclear on the best practice of finding mentor, and she's worried about the time that she will have to spend without actually finding anything meaningful. And she's also unsure about mentoring best practices at Google at large. Is that something that other people are doing, or is it just something that I'm individually interested in? So there's lack of sense of community in this effort. Next one. Another thing that you might discuss during lightning talks is a competition or competitive landscape, and looking at what else exists in the industry that is important and relevant. So here's a website called micromentor.org. So if you're putting together a sprint, you could do some research just online to see what's out there. And this website is a free social network that allows entrepreneurs and volunteer business mentors to connect. And it's combined with program support, and they also have an enterprise program for organizations that want to offer mentoring to their employees. So we can get inspired from what others are doing, and we can also find opportunities from what others are not doing. Another example would be entrepreneur coaching is a paid service that starts with a free strategic call, and they have training programs and live coaching via an iOS application. And another one, Mara Mentor, is a mentoring program and platform that focuses on assisting young and women entrepreneurs to help them realize their business dreams through exchange of ideas, guidance, learning, and connecting with industry leaders and the mentors. And the app, you can do things like following successful business leaders to gain a wider perspective that you may not have as a beginning entrepreneur, or connect with like-minded individuals and exchange ideas, again, the sense of community, and build your network and gain new insights that you didn't have on your own individual self. And often what we do at Google, and when I offer the sprint for others, I expand my idea of who are relevant to us. So even though this is business mentorship related, we could just look at some similar industries. So in this case, let's look at sitters. So Urban Sitter is an app where you can find a babysitter, and at its core, it's basically bringing two parties together, and we're finding a right match. So in that sense, there is a very big relevant aspect here between what you are trying to build today and this app. So that's why it's appropriate to bring this content to Lightning Talk. This service allows you to post a job or a position and then match people based on your criteria. You can then book them for an interview or a visit. So this offers you to find people, but also do the work of matching directly there through interview and visit. You can pay the sitters, and then it's through the platform, which makes it easy and read reviews about what their particular training and interests are. Another one, dating pool, is obviously something where we match people together. So Tinder is a matchmaking application, as many of you know. And again, even though it's a different industry, it is relevant to the opportunities that we're trying to look at. So that well-known interaction of swiping left and right indicates interest and allow people to connect with you. And that's very simple, easy access to, with very low effort to communicate your interest. And there are other problems like finding personal chef or personal trainer, house cleaner. So all of those examples can be relevant. And I think that's all we have for the Lightning Talk materials. And I am very glad to see many post-its per person. Great. So I think, are we still taking a break, you think?
Hopefully you got some good how might we's out of that, but if you don't worry. After the break, we're going to have another opportunity to write even more. All right, so before the break, we started the understand phase with some lightning talks, and we started capturing opportunities as how might we's as kind of a way to take notes through lightning talks. Now, another thing you might do during the understand phase is a user interview. You could have somebody report on a user interview that happened before the sprint as a lightning talk, or you could just do user interviews all together as part of the understand phase. I was talking to this gentleman a second ago, and he's like, well, what about, user empathy, and like, where is that part of design thinking baked in to a sprint? And it's right here and right now. So we're going to, we're going to do kind of, again, mock sprint within the confines of the brief time we have together. I said all that stuff. So user interviews help us uncover intentionality and motivation, and they let us ask the how and why questions. And this helps us understand what it's like to be or to do something, i.e. somebody looking for a mentor. So within your group right now, I need one volunteer to raise their hand, and I guess I should tell you what you're going to be doing. I need one person to pretend to be an interviewee. So what we're going to do, not yet, is one person from each team is going to go visit another team and be interviewed by them. So can I have one person from each team, one brave soul, just one from each team, identify themselves as like the person who's just going to be interviewed. They're just going to ask you about if you've ever wanted to find a mentor. Even if you've never wanted a mentor, you can tell them why you don't want a mentor. So just one person from each team. It kind of has to, somebody has to do it. Is there one volunteer from that group? It's just going to be with another team. You're not going to be on a microphone or anything. It's not a huge deal. We're okay? One person over there. I just want to make sure we have a person. You guys have a person? You guys? All right, cool. We got it, right? Cool. Not yet. Because first, within your groups, we're going to prepare our interview questions. And now I can't see my slides, so I'm going to look at it. Okay. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to work with your group and just come up with one sheet of questions. You don't all need to come up with your own individual questions. Just nominate somebody to be the scribe and write these down. Here's some sample questions you might ask. Walk me through the last time you looked for a mentor. What tools or platforms did you use to initially get connected? So notice these are not yes or no questions because you want to get your user to be talking as much as possible so you can capture how might we and identify those opportunities. Another example is if you've never looked for a mentor, why is that? And what was particularly challenging about the process? Those are some ideas to get you started. Feel free to copy those. That's cool. I know they're great. But I'm going to give you 5 minutes to, in your group, come up with just a list of questions that you're going to ask your user. Question over here. What's up?
You told that if you've never looked for a mentor.
Uh-huh.
If you've never looked for a mentor, that assumes that the person has not looked for a mentor. Yeah, we should ask. That assumes that you have asked, have you looked for a mentor, and the answer is yes or no. But you have told not to ask questions that lead to yes or no.
Yeah, I mean, and I think as the interview kind of goes, I mean, you'll pivot based. You don't have to just say like, if somebody's never looked for a mentor, you don't need to ask them about looking for a mentor. But you want to kind of pivot and say, well, tell me why, and like, would you be more inclined to look for a mentor if I told you this, this, and this, or like, what kind of resources are you looking for? You kind of, I mean, so you do come up with an initial list of questions, but if you move away from that, it's cool.
Okay.
Does that answer your?
Okay.
That's a very like sprint thing. You have a plan and then you pivot and do something else. But it's important to go into it somewhat prepared. Cool. So I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes to just come up as a group with your questions. Cool? All right. Looks like most people are done. If you're not done, that's okay. Again, this is just a practice. We're just trying out some of the methods, but I'm glad that you're excited about it. All right, so now is the time for my volunteers, not so much volunteers as much as I ordered you, to get up, not yet, when I say go. When I say go, these volunteers are going to get up and just go to another table. I would try to do some kind of like clockwise-y thing, but just make sure you're just not at your own table. Rotate to the table to your left. We can try that. Just go to another table. Not yet. When you get there, you're going to be interviewed, and the interviewers at your table are going to take notes based on your answers as how might we's. So again, we're capturing opportunities. We're coming up with even more how might we's. Does that make sense? Not yet, not yet, not yet. Hang on. Take notes as how might we's. Rotate. Okay, and then when you get there, you're going to have 10 minutes. Everybody clear? Okay, now go. Okay, so we've had a chance to catch our teams up. It's all right if you're not fully caught up. The point is that everybody has some how might we's, right? We all got how might we's. Let's come on back. Bring your attention back to me. Cool. Cool. Now, the person you interviewed might not have been your ideal user. I mean, again, this is totally like a mock sprint. But it's good to like kind of hear from them.
Sorry, I just want to make sure that everyone's paying attention to Dylin as we are moving on to the next step. So I'm really glad that there's a lot of conversation, but let's make sure that we come back to the front and center. All right, that's good enough. 98%.
All right. So again, the person you interviewed might not have been, your ideal user, but we just wanted to try it out, give you a sense of it. And as we go into our next activities, now normally you would consider the needs of the users you interviewed, but if the person you interviewed said, I don't want to mentor, I never want to mentor, there's not a whole lot to work with there. So let's imagine that you have done a bunch of user interviews and you have a good idea of who your target users are in our imaginary sense. Cool. So now we're going to move on to the next step. We're still in the understand phase, I know. So we've collected a bunch of opportunities, captured them as how might we's, and now we're going to just start to kind of narrow down this opportunity space. So we're going to do that by sharing out our how might we's. So not yet, but when I say go, you're going to go to, we got to be kind of scrappy because we've got a lot of people. You're going to take your group and go to either a whiteboard or one of the Post-it flip charts. We'll come around and help you find something to use, not yet. And when you get there, you're going to each take turns presenting your how might we's. You'll read it. If it requires some kind of explanation, say that, stick it up on the board. And as you start sticking these up, you'll start to kind of see categories naturally forming, especially as the second person starts presenting their Post-its. And so you want to kind of affinity map these and kind of start grouping them together. And then you can even label them as categories. And what this does is gives us, as we step back and look at them all, we get an idea of what these kind of opportunity spaces are from afar. Does that make sense? Sometimes people are tempted to take turns presenting their how might we's, like you read one, and then I read one, and then that. And we kind of discourage that because we want each person to have their allotted time to read all of their Post-its at once. We do this because sometimes in certain groups there's a quieter person who might be like, okay, here's my how might we, then you go. And then the next person might be really loud and want to talk forever about their thing. So we want each person to have their time to talk, their time to be heard. Super democratic process. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. Let's get up, this will be interesting to try to figure out. But try to go to the closest whiteboard / thing to you, and folks in the middle, we'll figure it out too. We've got some people to help. We'll make it work. Here we go. Oh, I had a thing about affinity mapping. There it is. You guys, I could bring this over to you. Great about this up. So go ahead and start affinity mapping. One person presents all of their Post-its at once, sticks them up there, and you can always rearrange things. If categories form and they get too big, you can break them into smaller categories. That's why they're Post-its, restickable. Okay. Okay, you don't need to sit back down. You can just stay standing because the next thing, but I just want to tell you what we're doing next. So we've identified opportunities, we've mapped those opportunities, we've shared them with our team, and now we're going to start narrowing them down by voting. What do I have on this slide? Okay, so when I say go, you're going to go back to the little supply cups that you have and grab 3 dots, doesn't matter what color they are, and you're going to get 3 votes. The rules are, it's okay to vote on your own idea. It's okay to put more than 1 dot on the same note. We'll pay more attention to notes that have multiple votes, so think strategically. If one already has 5 votes on it, then you can spend it somewhere else. And most importantly, we're not trying to get in one direction at this point in time. So we're not picking a winner here. We're still in the understand phase, the first phase of a design sprint. So we're just starting to narrow down the, kind of our, like, the opportunities that we want to tackle. Cool? All right, 3 votes, 3 minutes, go. We are going to finish out the understand phase with one more kind of user empathy method. We have identified opportunities. We've mapped them out. We've started to narrow them down. And all of these are just options for things that you might use as part of your understand phase. There's one more I want to do, which I think is super important, and it's called a user journey map. So user journey maps are documents that visually illustrate an individual user's needs, the series of interactions that are necessary to fulfill those needs, and the resulting emotional states a user experiences throughout the process. They focus on the problem space, so we're not yet imagining what the user will be when you design this amazing solution for them. We're focusing on the problem space right now. And this is going to be one more way for us to kind of understand this problem space by looking at what they're doing now and identifying pain points that we might be able to explore as opportunities. They tend to look something like this. So what you'll do when I say go is you'll get in your teams, you'll take these guys off, and so you have either a marker or a pen because you're going to do this up on your boards. And you're going to write the first step in someone's experience and then add each step until they have completed their task. You want to include descriptions for each step and identify and highlight pain points as you go. So for example, if we were in a design sprint coming up with an app to help somebody find an apartment, as part of my user journey, I would look at the way somebody might look for an apartment now without the existence of my app. So step 1 would be something triggers a need to move. Maybe you get a new job, a life change, your rent's raised, you live in San Francisco, you know. And then you'd come up with the steps after that, and the final step being secure a new place. So for our purposes, you know, your goal is obviously person has found a mentor, yay. So we're going to do this now, and I mean, it doesn't have to look like this. People do these all different ways, but you just want to capture these steps and look at how someone today might look for a mentor, and capture those pain points along the way. And then we can kind of take a step back and be like, oh, you know, maybe our app can do something to, you know, fix the awkwardness of finding where to meet, you know, your mentor for the first time. Does that make sense? People are often tempted because they see like this like flow and they're like, oh, we're storyboarding, we're coming up with a solution, but we are still in the understand phase, still just looking at this problem space. Cool? Cool. I know some people are still finishing up, but this is just practice. Just wanted to give you an idea of what this is like. I know we had to make a lot of assumptions in order to make this happen and make guesses, but in a real sprint, you'd be much more informed about your target user and what their user journey is like. But the point of this is that you get to map it out and kind of look at different pain points the user might have along their user journey and kind of aim to tackle those pain points and make them easier for the user. Cool, I'm getting a lot of nods. All right, let's take a break, shall we? People are ready for a break. That thing's always like makes my brain hurt making assumptions. Let's take another 7-minute break, cool? We just finished in our imaginary sprint, we just finished the understand phase. So we're gonna start the second phase of our design sprints, which is the define phase. And Jayeon is going to tell us more about that. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. You guys aren't very good clappers. But you're paying attention now, and that's the point. All right, here's Jayeon.
Hi. Oh, wow, that was loud. Hi, everyone. Nice. Thanks for the attention. So as Dylin mentioned, so far, most of our time we explored the understand phase, which is very important because, again, it puts us in the same page. Now we're moving on to the second phase, which is the define phase. So in the define phase, we'll continue to work with the material that we've been working on, the same products that we are trying to build. So here we're going to do a couple exercises. The first one is success metrics. So in success metrics, I briefly mentioned this earlier today, but define a shared understanding of what success means to everyone in the group. Because sometimes the designer might think of success as something, and PM1 might think of success as another thing, and PM2 has a different idea of what success means. So this is another critical step to make sure that you guys are sharing the problem that you're solving for has the same success metrics as a goal. So here, again, defining what success would look like, defining how it would be measured numerically, and metrics are quantifiable, and numeric outputs with regard to the desired behavior will be measured. We'll look at this list, which is what Google uses internally as a way to measure success. So we have 5 categories here, and those categories are happiness, engagement, acquisition, retention, and task completion. This is used across different teams inside Google, but like some teams, this may not make so much sense, so they can alternate it based on their own needs. But this is just a framework where you can start from. So when we put you into exercise mode, you're welcome to use these 5 categories or something else that makes sense more for your current product problem and also for your team. But before I put you into the exercise mode, I want to give a little more concrete example. So let's say you have 3 categories that you want to put success metrics onto, and one of the categories is adoption. So if that's the case, you put adoption as a category that you want to measure against, and the goal would be, in this case, users starting. So this, assuming this is a payment example, users start using Smart Pay, which is a particular feature, let's assume, to pay their bills. And success metrics within this category, and particularly within the category, can be number of clicks and action to pay that results in a paid bill. So because it's number of clicks, it's measurable, it's quantifiable. So that's why we want to narrow down and make it a little more tangible, so that other people can share your way of seeing success metrics, and so that you can see other people's way of seeing what success means to them. That's what we're really trying to bring together by putting the metrics part. So again, this doesn't have to limit the ultimate way of what the success of a product will become, but this is a good way to share understanding of what success means across team members in your group. So let's go ahead and meet with your group and think of 2 to 3 different categories. I think one good way to think about is the categories that you already came up with for how might we. Maybe just start from there and pick 1 or 2 or 3 categories from there and put this category-specific goal to each category and think about how to measure that numerically. And that can, again, come in different ways. It doesn't have to be 1-1-1 ratio. It can be 1-1 and 3. You can come up with different ways of success metrics.
All right, so we have done the understand phase. We had a little taste of the define phase. And now we're going into one of my favorite phases, which is the sketch phase. And all morning we've been holding back from coming up with solutions. We've just been identifying opportunities and pain points. And now it's time to come up with those brilliant ideas. All right. I want to make sure I said everything I wanted to say about that. All right, so again, the sketch phase is where a broad range of ideas are generated and shared. We look to other solutions in alternate spaces to generate ideas, take notes and collect our thoughts. That's what we've done. And then we might jump into Crazy Eights, which are a fast ideation exercise. We time box this, and you're going to be asked to come up with 8 ideas in 8 minutes. Get ready. Don't stress. It's going to be great. So Crazy Eights are a core sprint method as part of the sketch phase. And the goal here is to push beyond your initial idea. And hopefully the pressure of time helps you do that. It kind of forces you because you really want to try to come up with 8 different ideas in 8 minutes. These are intended to communicate ideas, but they don't need to be beautiful. Don't be nervous about sketching. You saw my beautiful positivity girl. I myself am not an artist. Just stick figures and diagrams are all game here. So we're going for quantity over quality, super high level ideas. Don't worry about making them pretty. Also, this is not a storyboard. People are often tempted because you got the squares and you want to fill them in and tell a story. These are 8 separate ideas. So they could be things like a UI. Here's what I want a screen on my app to look like. Or it could be 2 stick figures saying like, oh, I used this app and had this great experience because of solution X. Does that make sense? Ish, kind of. Everybody's already doing the folding. But if you haven't done the folding, do this folding. You did a great job. Does everyone have a piece of paper? Everybody's all ready. You guys are way ahead of the game. Sorry? So that's a good question. So she asked if the ideas have to do with the sticky notes. Again, I'm going to do this. Whenever I'm explaining design sprints, I'm always doing this. And this is my invisible funnel of ideas. And so we have a bunch of ideas, and we're just narrowing in more and more and more. So your idea could be based off of an opportunity you saw earlier, a sticky note, something, a pain point from the user journey. You have all of that as fair game. Or you could just think of a random idea that has nothing to do with anything we've discussed thus far. That's totally okay, too. So it can really come from anywhere. But you've got this kind of background now that we've done the understanding and defining. Cool? Okay, wait, hang on. Because this one we have to be more exact about the time. Nope, not 5 minutes. All right, 8 minutes on the clock. Don't be nervous. Try to get all 8 squares filled in. On your mark. Oh, it's also a silent activity. There's that. You're ideating on your own. You will have an opportunity to share this with your team afterwards, but for now, silent activity, 8 minutes. On your marks, get set, go. All right, so we have diverged and ideated on our own as part of the sketch phase, and now we are going to converge, come all back together, and share our ideas with our teams. Not yet. Since we're pressed for time, I'm gonna tell you everything, and then we're just gonna do it. We're gonna take our sketches. There's tape around. We got some tape. Oh, there are little pieces of tape on our whiteboards. We'll come around and make sure you have more tape. When I say go, you're going to stick your sketch up, go around similar to the way that we shared our how might we's. Stick your sketch up and explain it. Each person has their own opportunity to share all of their sketches. And then I'm going to tack on the decide part of this as well, since we're pressed for time. And that is to vote again with 3 voting dots. After everybody's presented, of course, you're going to take your 3 voting dots, and the same rules apply. You can vote on your own. You can vote more than once on the same one. Etc. And again, we're narrowing down, not picking one specific direction at this time. Cool? Let's do it. Okay, since we don't have enough time, I'm going to quickly tell you what we would do in the next 2 phases, prototype and validate. So the next phase, do I have that up there? All right. So after doing our crazy eights during the sketch phase, we would probably sketch a few more times and narrow it down a little bit more. Okay, so the next phase we'd go into after deciding on a solution sketch we all agree on and storyboarding it, we'd start the prototype phase. Once a direction has been selected, the team works together to draft a storyboard of what they'd like to prototype. This is a time when many specific decisions are made around exactly what the concept is. And prototyping is about building something that's just real enough to validate the ideas you have. It does not need to be a fully functioning app. We don't want it to be a fully functioning app. Generally, simple static mocks that a user can click through are enough to answer your sprint questions. And the important thing here is that we do this really fast. In less than a day or however much time you have, your team is going to create a real enough prototype to answer your sprint questions, in theory. After that, we'd go into the validation phase, which is the moment of truth when you take your prototype and put it in front of your users. This is an exciting time during the sprint where you can get to see the users interact with your prototype and give you feedback on it. This is also a time when you can conduct a review with stakeholders if the purpose of your sprint is around that. Cool? All right, so that's the end of our imaginary sprint. Give yourselves a round of applause. Okay, 2 more minutes. All right, then quickly. So this workshop explained design sprints in the context of a mobile app, but the methodology can be applied to just about anything. And so Jayeon wanted to...
Oh yeah, I just wanted
yeah.
to invite and encourage you to think about how to apply what you are doing at your organization and use design sprint methodologies, whether it's the full design sprint or just portion of those. And we'd love to hear. I was going to ask people to share here, but since we don't have time, we still love to hear. And if it becomes anything that significantly helps your team, please let me know. Feel free to let me know. And because my role at Google, again, is really to meet and work with external partners, we give design reviews and design feedback and critique, and also sometimes go facilitate these sprints for your team as well. So if you give me some details about how this gets observed in your organization, I would love to hear that. You can find my contact, which is not here, either on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or my email address is just my first name and @google.com. So.
I'll send it out with the slides.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Dylin.
All right, we're out of time, but quickly. Here's some resources to go run a design sprint of your own. We have a website called designssprintkit.withgoogle.com. URLs were, I don't know, sparse. That is a great, this is a really great website. It's got all kinds of resources on planning, all the different methodology, great resource. Another one you might have heard of is the Google Ventures Design Sprint book. I think it's super helpful. One thing I always say about this is it's a very prescriptive book. They run it like each design sprint has to be 5 days long. I've personally never done a 5-day design sprint. I think you can do it in 2 to 3 days. But it gives really helpful context to like why each of the phases is an important part of the big picture. The links are there. Don't worry, I'll send them out so you don't have to remember them. And now I'm going to hand it off to Shiri to tell you about a very important thing that has to do with lunch, right?
Right, but first of all, everyone join me in a round of applause to Dylin, Jayeon. Thank you so much.